Probably going to lose, but you go ahead, do it. So I don't think we're going to lose. I think we're going to win for a couple reasons. But let me tell you a little bit about me, myself, and sort of what led me to do this wonderful thing, I think, because it's been a great experience so far. I really enjoy meeting people up and down the state. We were talking about, I was talking to someone else earlier about as far south as Delaware, as far north as Claymont, and I've been to everywhere and in between. But, so I was born and raised here in Wilmington, Delaware. Grew up actually off of Maryland Avenue originally, and then my mom and dad moved out off of Hillside Road by where Adapon High School is. Went to Slazanum High School. I went to the University of Delaware and the Delaware Law School. And I have a big family. Most of them are here tonight. And I'm going to recognize them in a little bit. But my dad, who is one of my mentors who sits on this shoulder, my mom, my other one who sits here, have guided me, I think, to get me to this point. And it's been a great point. But why am I running? I think, I've read a lot, and I've heard different people talk about the Delaware way. The Delaware way. Anybody know what the Delaware way is? We'll probably have 12 different answers to it. My view of the Delaware way is that Delaware is such a small state where you can know almost everybody, or know someone who knows everybody, or like Aaron, you'd be related to almost everybody. And that's a great thing. And so you can run into your senator, or your congressman, or your state senator. Is Greg still Greg? Yep. Or other folks, your party chairs, at the grocery store, at the hardware store, or wherever. And you can have a conversation, a real conversation. I ran into somebody at the grocery store just yesterday, and we were talking about things that were interesting to them. And that's what the Delaware way means to me. And I think, when I look at politics today, it's really become very partisan and almost bitter. And so I hope not to ever become bitter. As my core principles, and you'll see this, if you haven't gone to our website, it's at votetruono.com. We made it easy so we could remember it. If you want to contact me, it's just gene@votetruono.com. If you want to contact Aaron, it's just aaron@votetruono.com. I'm saying this several times, so you remember to go to votetruono.com. And then click on the Facebook link at the bottom and like our Facebook page, because we really would appreciate that. Because that's where we are. It'll tell you where we are, what we're doing, who we're engaged with, and what's important to me in the campaign, and the issues that I think I care about, and I think that most of you probably in this room care about. So my two core principles are the Constitution and states' rights. Now that sounds very simplistic, but if you think about it, we have lost that. We see so much, I guess, anxiety in Washington about partisan politics and people picking sides and saying, well, we're not going to vote for that because the Republicans did, or the Republicans, we're not going to vote that because the Democrats did. And that's not what I want to do when I go to Washington. I want to represent the people of the state of Delaware, so I can bring the Delaware way to Washington. The other thing about the Delaware way to me is that we have resigned ourselves in some cases, and in public publications, that Delaware is a blue state. We don't have representation of our conservative values, at least the conservative values that I represent. And in a republic, you have to look at the people who represent you and see if they're aligned in how you feel and what you believe in. And I think the one-party rule we have today in Washington needs to change. I think we need to have people in Washington that represent all of our views. We may not always agree, like Aaron said, but at least we can have an honest debate about policy in this country that I think is important for all of us, so that we have that discord and then come to a resolution and solve problems, not just react to emotional issues and things that people really don't care about. You see some of the legislation that I see get passed, or at least attempted to be passed in Washington, and I'm thinking, why aren't you talking about jobs, the economy? Why aren't you talking about the education system? Why aren't you talking about health care? These are the things that people really care about. These are the things that people tell me that they care about. So I want to distinguish myself from Tom Carper, who I ultimately will be running against. And he did not vote for the tax reform bill. And I scratched my head. Not one Democrat voted for that tax reform bill. I read an article today about Nancy Pelosi, and oh gosh, I hope Nancy Pelosi never retires. She is the gift, she is just the gift that keeps on giving. But she said that she's going to repeal this tax cut because it was only for the rich. And I'm thinking, was she not paying attention when all of those big companies gave out bonuses to their employees at the end of the year. Granted, they got a big tax cut, but they did share it with their employees. She called it crumbs. I don't think a lot of people that got $1,000 and $2,000 bonuses thought they were crumbs. I don't think the people that got $2, $3, $4, and $5 an hour raises thought they were just crumbs. I think those people thought, wow, this is pretty good. And oh, by the way, I'm going to have more money in my pocket this year, which they are, and they're seeing. Now, the process takes some time, so I don't think people have seen the full effects. But what we are concerned about here in Delaware are jobs. And stimulating the economy through tax cuts and reduction in regulation are the two things that will bring jobs back to Delaware. And I think that's extremely important. And the fact that our senior senator doesn't realize that and would vote against that, I'd ask him this question if you see him out and about. Are you going to vote for tax reform too? Because that's coming. And that's going to make the tax cuts permanent. Now, Nancy Pelosi also said, well, see, the Republicans didn't make the tax cut permanent for the middle class. And she knows full well why that is. They passed it on a parliamentary move of 51 votes, which were all Republicans, which got the tax cut across the board. They couldn't make the tax cuts permanent because they needed at least, I'll do the math real quick, nine Democrats, or there could have been 8 with the vice president voting as well. That's the only way we can make the tax cuts permanent. So Democrats have to either get on board or shut up and say, you know, we're not supporting middle class tax cuts. I think that's really important, and I think that's a good, honest, and fair question for Tom Carper. Now, regulation, that's something I spent 30 years in the financial services industry. I think most of you people knew that. I worked at Wilmington Trust, my first job. I was the only compliance officer for the entire bank, the bank holding company. There's subsidiaries in Maryland and in Florida. And I was the only one, and I did it all. And I was a full-time staff attorney, by the way, who actually had the retail branches, commercial lending, private bank, corporate trust, because I wasn't there that day, nobody wanted corporate trust, and I did charge-off recovery collections. And I was the full-time compliance officer. Do you know how many people I had at PayPal? I had 120 people in policy worldwide, and I had about 4,000 people doing transaction monitoring. I just think there's something wrong with that, because I don't think we're getting any better at meeting those regulatory requirements. I think we need to revisit the whole regulatory structure. I think we need to shrink the size of the federal government, and we can do that by cutting regulations as well. And I think we need to push those types of programs that we have down to the states, because I think it's the state and the local level, that's why I'm a states' rights person, can solve the problems for the veterans, for health care, for education, much better than our federal government. So those are where I stand on those primary issues. Now, there was some regulatory relief for the Dodd-Frank bill. Everybody know Dodd-Frank. That was the big bill that created the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and it created a whole bunch of regulations. The Volcker Rule, which still hasn't been deployed yet, and that's now we're 8 years out because they can't figure out how to make it effective. I never agreed with it to begin with because I didn't think it was the right approach. But in any event, I would take Dodd-Frank and go a lot further than what this bill did. But the Republicans are being criticized, but it was a bipartisan bill, and both Tom Carper and Chris Coons did vote for it. Obviously, we're a banking state, and they wanted to support their constituents, so I applaud them for that. But I don't think the bill goes far enough. But what it did do is one very important thing, because the Dodd-Frank bill created what was called a specified mortgage rule. And what it did is it created more regulations around certain types of mortgages because they thought that would fix the problem. Well, when I started in the financial services industry, I can see someone from the bank shaking her head, yeah. There was a bill, it was called the Savings and Loan Bailout Bill. The actual technical name was FIREA. And that was in 1987. And I helped implement that at Wilmington Trust. And when I read it, I thought, this is not going to solve the problem. Remember, that's where a lot of savings and loans got into trouble because they made mortgages that shouldn't have. Well, fast forward to 2008. Is that a repeat of history? Or did we just have bad law that didn't solve the problem? I think we had bad law that didn't solve the problem. So one of the things that I do want to do when I get to Washington is look at regulatory reform. I think the administration took an interesting approach. And I like to say this, they took a machete to cut 2 regulations for every new one that got passed. That's a good first step. I think what we need to do is take a scalpel now and really look at how we reform every industry. I'd start on the Senate Banking Committee and figure out how we can really create more jobs and create lending for both small businesses and for homeowners, because that's where they get hurt because of the overregulation. That's what people don't understand. And I've always said that the people who end up paying for all this excessive regulation are the consumers. Those are the people we're trying to help. But the people in Congress, like Elizabeth Warren, who've never had a job other than being a law professor and then a senator, don't understand that. She talks about the home mortgage disclosure register. I used to fill them out in pencil. I don't think she knows what it is, because she said because we're going to take back some of the requirements of that register, it's going to lead to discrimination in lending. I used to teach lending discrimination for all the banks I worked for. I taught it for the American Institute of Banking, the American Bankers Association, and I did